Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Diachronic. On this Destiny 2 video, we're talking about the top 5 weapons to use in the Nightfall with the Prestige, with the Handicap, with the current meta, with the Singe, and all that stuff. We're going to be talking about the ones that are very specifically geared for this meta. We've done 4 Nightfalls now, or 4 specific different Nightfalls. I've gotten like 80,000 score on almost every single one of them, and as they're not the most amazing score, they are pretty high score, and I'd like to say in general, the average person can get 80,000 just by equipping this certain setup, and of course, doing these certain class setups that I show you guys every week. But from week to week, it seems like this set of weapons is pretty consistently the best set of weapons. Keep in mind that this is specifically geared for the Nightfall with its meta of having a handicap, needing to stay at range, so weapons like the Origin Story, the Merciless, as well as the Cold Heart are just not fitting into this Nightfall meta and are just not as effective as they were without the handicap. If you do end up liking this video, make sure you leave a like down below so other people can find this video, as well as subscribe for more top 10, top 5, and of course Destiny Nightfall tips in the future. Coming in at number 5 in this top 5 Nightfall weapons is going to be the Nameless Midnight Explosive Scout Rifle. Now, this is the tried and true Scout Rifle. Everybody knows it. Everybody loves it. You can get it while you're going through the campaign as a choice of 3 weapons, and you can also get it from the Vanguard vendor from his random drops of engrams. Just keep giving Zavala these tokens, these Vanguard tokens, and you should have it drop within like 3 or 4 of them. It's not that complicated. It's not that different from what you get from the other things, and I'd highly recommend you pick it up. It's one of those middling fire rate, middling clip size, good damage, explosive scout rifles will help you keep you at range. It's got good reload speed overall and a great average assault rifle, and it is amazing. One of the PvE kings that you can use in pretty much any scenario. It's very fun, very effective, and very useful, and sometimes even useful in PvP. As far as perks go, I use the Red Dot Micro, which is the first one on the first column. The second column, I use Flared Magwell for the increased range instead of its stability, because this weapon is kind of, again, a middling fire rate, so you don't really need increased stability on it. However, most people go with these steady rounds. And lastly, of course, it has its explosive payload. Again, this weapon is amazing. Use it whenever. However, these next 4 weapons on this list are very more specifically geared for Nightfall. It just so happens that the Nameless Midnight fit in there just because it's an amazing PvE in general. Coming in at number 4 in this top 5 Nightfalls is going to be the Uriel's Gift Assault Rifle, and this is the auto rifle that's in the secondary slot. Many people know it. It's one of the most popular weapons in PvP, if not the most popular, and I'd highly recommend you check it out and try it out, because this weapon is easy to use, it's fun to use, and it's also interchangeable for any 450 or more specifically 600 fire rate assault rifles like the Null Calamity, like the Iron Banner one. Any assault rifle with kind of decent stability, similar stability to the Uriel's Gift, obviously. Again, I say decent because you don't really need amazing, or if it bounces like the Origin Story, it's not as useful because it's more difficult to use. And the reason why the Uriel's Gift is in this slot at number 4 is because auto rifles in general have the best DPS in the game, and they can be used against the boss to a great effort, especially considering that's a secondary slot with the burn, increases its damage by 25%, which make it even better to use against the boss. But in general, for some reason, they're not as effective at killing the regular enemies, you know, like the Thrall running around, the Dregs, the Vex guys. Any of those regular guys are not as effective at handling, so I would recommend the Uriel's Gift for the kind of boss section and have a primary weapon that you use for most of your enemy killing. As far as perks go, I recommend having the first sight. It's a lot easier to use. Many people use the second sight for its perks or its kind of buffs to, I think, stability or something, but the first one is just a lot easier for me to use. And secondarily, I also use the first perk in the second column, which is going to be steady rounds, because it needs a little help with its stability. In PvP, you'd use high caliber rounds on it, however, but in PvE, I like using steady rounds, which makes it a lot easier to handle at mid-range. And of course, lastly, tap the trigger. Make sure you tap that trigger to get a much better stability handle on it. Coming up number 3, one of my personal favorite weapons is going to be the exotic rocket launcher known as the Wardcliff Coil. And everybody knows this weapon. When they first got it, was like, oh my god, this weapon is ridiculous. I just rain fire over the entire battlefield and I can just destroy entire groups of enemies. And then they use it at mid-range and they're like, this weapon is absolute trash, and they never use it again, which is unfortunate because this is one of the best burst weapons in the entire game. It has the biggest dump of damage in the entire game, and that is including the Sins of the Past and the Curtain Call. Even if all of the hits, all of the cluster bombs hit your target, this weapon still does more damage if you're close enough. Now, I'm not saying that you should use this weapon on the boss, however, I am saying you should use it on those majors and ultra that you find along the way. Now, in this most recent Nightfall, you can use them on the Orange Health Knights, and I kid you not, they will one burst, or like one shot, one rocket volley, a single Orange Health Knight. Now, it'll do it barely, and you kind of have to have the Arc Burn on it, and it will kill them, or if you don't have the Arc Burn, it will barely not kill them. This is amazing. You can stop them from doing their endless amounts of heals and shields and all that other garbage they use. You can use it on the Hydras and literally one-shot the red health Hydras. You can use it on the Minotaurs with the orange health and it will one-shot those guys. It is an amazing and ridiculously powerful weapon. You just swoop in there, especially with a hunter, because it's readies faster for the hunters than it does with the Titan, because the hunter bounces and they're ready to shoot and all that stuff. You get an invis hunter with one of your tethers, since you're using tether all the time, and those are also hunters. You can have him with a ward cliff. Have 1 or 2 people in your group with ward cliffs and just decimate, I mean decimate every one of those orange health enemies that keep you and make it a lot slower to get through. Coming in at number 2 in the top 5 weapons for the Nightfall is gonna be the Better Devil's Explosive Hand Cannon. Now this high damage Crucible hand cannon obviously can be found from shacks, from its random drops and tokens and whatnot, as well as in the Crucible, and sometimes randomly somewhere else. This is an extremely effective weapon no matter where you are. PvE, PvP, this weapon is fun, it's useful, it's explosive so it's easy to use, as well as explosive so it has a higher range on it. And in the Nightfall, even though it's a primary kinetic slot, it's still like 1 or 2 shots the lower health enemies, like the Thralls, the Dregs, the Acolytes, the Vex guys at 1 or 2 shots, all of them, and it's a lot easier to use because it flinches the enemies, and a lot easier to use because you can use it pretty much any range as long as you can literally point it at the enemy. And on top of that, it's just effective to use against the boss as well. As far as perks go, I recommend any kind of sight that you like. Most people use the 3rd sight. On the 2nd column, I recommend using the flared magwell. For some reason, some people like the extended mags. However, I'd like to make the point that this weapon is incredibly boring and annoying to use while having to deal with that really long reload. Having an extra 4 in the magazine is just not worth the reload time that it takes to reload, so I highly recommend you go with that steady rounds or the flared magwell. My apologies, I keep getting confused. Going for that flared magwell because it makes the reload a lot better, a lot more satisfying, a lot more usable, and in general, I was using the extended mags for a long time with this weapon, just hating this weapon, not wanting to use it. I switched it to the higher reload and I fell in love with this weapon. So if you haven't given this a chance with the faster reload, I highly recommend you try it out. It is just very fun to use, very convenient, and very awesome power. And finally, coming in at number 1 in this top 5 of the best Nightfall weapons, and in general, one of the best PvE weapons in the game, is going to be the Mononon Explosive Secondary Scout Rifle. Now, this is one of those things that have been coming out of the woodworks. I discovered it back in like the first faction rally when I saw a video of somebody using it. Explosive Scout Rifle for the secondary slot with arc singe or any kind of singe on makes this weapon amazing. Put on top of that it has the fire rate of about the Mida multi-tool. I think it's like 50 round RPM off of the actual Mida multi-tool. This is one of the fastest firing rates of all scout rifles, and it has explosive rounds. It also has an incredible reload, so you don't even have to improve the reload with one of its perks, which is why on the perks section, I recommend you go with the steady rounds instead of the alloy magazine, which, you know, obviously means you reload faster because this weapon just reloads fast as it is. I know in the previous one I recommend reload speed, but that's because that one was slow. This one's fast, so ignore the reload and go for the stability because, of course, it is faster fire rate, so it's a little more difficult to control. And again, you have explosive rounds, which means you can handle enemies at almost any range, which means you can also stun and stumble the enemies just by your explosive shots, which means you don't even have to hit the enemy in their critical spot to still do amazing damage. Now, I know I'm getting kind of a hard on this weapon, but I think the only thing that would make this weapon better is if you could see your radar while looking down sights. Like, there's not really much way you can make this weapon better than it already is. I highly recommend you try it out for any PvE as well as PvP because it's fast fire rate scout rifle. It's still very effective, and explosive rounds throw people around. You can use it in pretty much anything. Now, this is, again, one of the most recent changes to the meta. A lot of people are discovering this weapon, but it is extremely effective. If you look up any video online where you see people going for high scores on Nightfalls, you will see somebody, most likely like everybody, using the Mononon. So pick it up, find it. It's a random drop throughout, I think, every engram. It's not specifically anybody's pool, so you're gonna have to search for it. I reckon maybe dumping into the gunsmith. You might be able to get it there, but I would check his inventory to see if it's in the list. In general, it's a rather rare drop because of the fact that it's not in anyone's specific pool, so you gotta have to grind for it if you don't have it. But anyways, that's the video for you guys today. I hope you guys did enjoy. I apologize for rambling a little bit, but I wanted to get my point across on a lot of these weapons. Lastly, I wanted to make an honorable mention to the Sins of the Past and the Cluster Rockets of the Curtain Call. Both of these weapons are more effective against killing the boss than the Wardcliff Coil. So in general, I recommend having 1 or 2 Wardcliff Coils, and then the last amount having in the Sins of the Past Curtain Calls, because a lot of times with the boss, you have to dump into the boss to avoid an entire phase. It's very, very important that you have these guys but in general, the Wardcliff is just so much more effective against groups of enemies, as well as those single target orange health enemies, but these Sins of the Past is still just an effective weapon. And overall, I think I've named 2 of each, 2 heavies, 2 secondaries, and 2 primers. You can use them in any combo you want. I recommend using the Better Devils, Mononon, and Wardcliff. That's my go-to strategy. I have long range, I have close range, I have damage, and I have burst damage with that heavy, and it is very fun and very effective to use. And my most recent Nightfall clips have all been with that setup. And of course, you should masterwork all of these things, except for obviously the exotics, because you can't yet, but which will make them even more effective and more fun to use. But anyways, that's the video for you guys today. Make sure you check out my future videos as well as my past videos on the Nightfalls. I'm going to try to do like every Wednesday, you know, the Wednesday right after the Tuesday that comes out. I'm going to try to do a high score guide where I try to get around 80,000, 90,000 score, maybe even go for like 100,000 if I'm crazy that week, and try to give you guys a kind of setup and a strategy for the things in general. These are the weapons that you're going to use every week, so they're very important that you get these weapons and use them, and make sure you stay tuned every single Wednesday for these videos to come out because I'm loving these Nightfalls. Anyways, that's been the video for you guys today. Hope you guys did enjoy it. Make sure you leave a like down below. It really helps the channel out and it gets this video out so other people can see it, so they can start using these better weapons and actually start helping you a lot more than they are. But anyways, I've been your host, Diachronic, and I'll see you guys on the next one.